right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast, brought to you by Huntworth. Huntworth gear for all types of weather, all types of terrain, all types of budgets. It's clothing that just works. Check them out at huntworthgear.com. And when you head over there, make sure to use their code PRE30, P-R-E-30, like preseason 30% off sale. And that's good until September 1st, excluding the clearance stuff and the new Vertec camo. 30% off. If I was going to choose one thing, it would be the Grayling hoodie or some of the Durham pants. That's what I plan on using for the early season. A lot of the time when I'm out in Colorado, those are going to be the couple items that I'm definitely packing with me. So check that stuff out. And 30% off is a heck of a deal, especially on that, like I say, that Grayling hoodie. Worth it, in my opinion. This podcast, with a good friend of mine, Alex Chopp, hunts very similar, more successfully than I do, but the same style, or the style that I like. And I think that it's good to hear from maybe higher profile guys to kind of show that it doesn't have to be all calculated. We can kind of do it on the fly, and having fun with that is very important. So definitely you guys are going to like this one. It's a fun conversation. It's a good conversation. And, I mean, we're getting into – guys are already hunting down in Tennessee, some of the southern states, southeastern states. We've already got seasons going right along. So we're back into the hunting swing of things. And over at Latitude, check out all their new stuff. They've got that new Ranger, I think it's called the Ranger 22 pack, coming out. We talk a little bit about this at the end of the podcast, but if you're on their email list, you've got a notification about it, but it's one of the revamped TX5 packs, as well as, like I say, I've got that Maverick saddle, freaking amazing. Check it out. At Latitude, on their website, you can use code BHC for 15%. And if you're paying attention with our partners and a lot of the other folks that we surround ourselves with, Austin over at Genesis 3D has just launching product after product after product. Definitely go over there and check out all the new stuff that he's got going on. And he does have a code for Patreon, so if you're a Patreon and you're looking to buy something from Austin, get a hold of us and we'll share that with you. He really has dove in headfirst into our Patreon community, and he's kind of showcasing some of the stuff over there. So definitely support Austin. And in that, Spartan Forge, you can save 25% with them. Go on their website, use code BOWHUNTER to save 25%. Big Shot Targets, you can save 10% using code BCP there. We got to thank the guys at Lucky Buck. I was just at the Bowman's Club cutting down, paper tuning my new Kanadi arrows for my trad bow, using those SBD. They're I don't know what they are. They're the big ones, the megas or whatever they're called. And they fly pretty well out of the trad bow. They're at least on my bow, they're a little bit particular on the angle. So if you have a cant on your bow, they fly much differently than if the bow is more vertical. But they're shooting just fine. So I think we're going to end up running some of those this year. But those guys, Brian, Steve, and Brandon are just awesome dudes. So definitely help those guys out. Go show them some love. But again, this podcast here, I think, is kind of like almost like a mission statement for the way that I hunt. So when I get the notifications from Latitude or whatever, and it said it's okay to go in blind, I was like, we absolutely have to talk about that. So that's what this podcast is. Man, we're right in it, like I said, in the season. So I hope everybody's preseason is going well. If you're hunting, good luck to you. Share those successes with us, and we're going to showcase some of those a little bit more this year, and really looking forward to getting into it. But this was a super fun podcast. Absolutely had a blast, and I think you guys are going to love it. As always, thanks for listening. Check us out over at patreon.com/Bowhunter Chronicles podcast if you want to get in on the Marco Polo group. We've got our Patreon hunt coming up, all of that sort of stuff. So Again, thank you for listening. All right, everybody, Adam back with another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. And today we're talking with a good friend of mine, Alex Chopp. And, you've probably seen Alex. They do an incredible job with Latitud Outdoors and, their marketing, their branding, top-notch products, all of that. And personally, when it came up that I was going to be hunting Kentucky, in an area with lots of hills, I was like, to the guy that I'm going with, I was like, we have to talk to Alex because I feel like he figures this stuff out almost better than anybody. And then, after I had that conversation, they came out with this marketing slogan, branding on one of their pieces of advertisements that said, it's okay to go in blind. And that to me is the way that I think a lot of people would like to hunt. And I think that they're pushed in a different direction. So that's what I want to talk about today, is kind of like how that fits. And like I said, there's no better person to talk to with that than Alex Chopp. So how are you doing today, Alex?
Doing great, surviving. I got a little bit of a childcare going on at my house right now, so I apologize for the kid noises if you hear them.
No, you'll be fine. This will be good. But so here we are. I guess, when does your season start this year? Because we're almost to Labor Day, and there's a guy's already hunting in Tennessee. In the South, seasons have started. So when does your season officially start?
Well, typically September 1st. I've actually fallen in love with September. It's a treat being a Michigan guy, being able to hunt that early. And, I always thought that the early season stuff, and this is again, just just being a Michigan hunter, right? We're not used to hunting that early. And so I always had this preconceived notion that, it's so hard to get a deer on the ground or have encounters early in the year. And, but September, man, is an awesome opportunity. So this year, in the past, we've gone out September 1st, wherever we can. It's been Nebraska. And this year we're pushing it back a week for a couple different reasons. For the past 2 years, we've talked about pushing it back just because of some of the experiences we've had out there. They're cutting the corn, and usually when we're out there, they're starting to cut the corn and things. And so we're pushing it back a week. So we're going to head out on the 8th this year to Nebraska. And Corey and myself, we drew Kansas. So we're actually just doing them back to back. So we'll be out there for 10 days, 5 days in each state. And it's going to be interesting. I'm excited.
And so in that vein, we have guys that hunt multiple states on here, and they're scouting, they're putting in hundreds of miles, they're doing all of this stuff. And I think, again, with social media and, these, I don't even want to say that they're like hunting influencers. They're just these like really good hunters who put in the work, and then, they're representing brands. I think there's a difference between that guy and a guy that's like, hey, look at all my stuff. I think of that as an influencer versus like these guys who are really, really getting after it, but they are influencing like the regular guy to think that they have to put all this time in. So when you guys come out with this branding that says it's okay to go in blind, like, what does that mean to you? And how much scouting have you done up to this point? Because I know you're a very busy guy.
Yeah. So, there's no question that scouting helps you. If you're able to put in 200 miles of scouting, you're going to have a little bit of an edge coming when you get to the season. But for me, it seems like every year I get to scout less. The last 2 years, I haven't been able to scout at all outside of the season. So I've kind of embraced that, and it's become very fun for me because it's just exciting. I have no idea what we're going to get into. And it's certainly a little less efficient, but it's a lot of fun. And I think back to what you said about the the post you saw about it's okay to go in blind. Well, the reason I wanted to do that is just because I don't think people should feel like they have to scout their tails off to have a good time in the fall. You can have a really good time in the fall. And if you're anything like me, I would argue you can have a better time in the fall, kind of surprising yourself when you get out there. So I think the average guy, they don't have time to put in. I mean, some of these guys live in those hot areas, right? In those areas, they focus right next to their house. They've got their longest drive to scout is 15 minutes. They get to glass on the way home from work every day. I know guys, I've got guys sending me trail camp or glassing pictures. Every day they're out there glassing these fields, which I think is fantastic. I wish I could do that. It's just, I don't have the opportunity to do it. So that's kind of where the it's okay to go in blind statement comes from. I think it's an important thing for us hunters to realize that it's okay. You don't have to be over calculated with this. It's okay to have a good time. It's not a military operation. It really isn't. It can be if that's your style, but it doesn't have to be. So that's really the point of that post you saw.
So how does that dictate throughout the year, and we can almost break it down. It's hard because we're talking at different times of year, different states, but I think it's relevant to the consumer, to the listener. As you're doing that, I guess, where do you start? So from your e-scouting to when you get into the woods, and then the mindset, because I've witnessed it a little bit hunting with you, but not to the point where, I've heard from some of our other mutual friends where it's like you get like somewhat obsessed when you're there as far as like the tenacity. So I think that's where maybe some guys have that on the front end, you have it in the moment, but like, where do you start? And then what drives your decision-making process as you're going in blind, right?
Yeah, I mean, so you actually brought up a good point. When you are going into a place that you're totally unfamiliar with, the intensity of that 5 to 7 days or whatever it is heightened versus when you have scouted a piece for a long time and you're kind of taking it easy and you're very calculated about what you're doing. Because when you go in and you only have 5 to 7 days, you really feel that, because your time really feels limited just because you haven't been in there. You know nothing about it. So now a lot of guys would say, what? I hate that, and that's okay. It's just, I love that aspect of it. It is very intense. When you get on location, it is like, oh, where do we even start here? It's a feeling of uncertainty. It's a very intense feeling, and I love that about it. But for me, it starts on the map, like you said, e-scouting. And what I'll do is I'll go and I'll mark. I will very quickly. This is a little bit different now. It's kind of morphed over the years, but I will go and I will just very quickly pick out the terrain features that I want in that specific area. And I'll just mark them all within an hour radius of where we're staying. And I do that. And then when we get on location, I just drive around and look at those spots. And I'll either change the color of them I use white and black. They start out black. If I like them, they turn to white when we drive by them. But a lot of these spots that I mark on the map, when you drive by them, you can tell, and you're probably going to ask, how can you tell? And I don't have a good answer for that, but some spots just feel, it's almost like fishing, right? It's like, oh, this feels like a fishy spot. Well, there are just certain spots that feel deery, if you will. And so that's my first step, is I take a wide net of pins, and then I get on location and I weed those, I narrow those down to spots that I, for whatever reason, feel that they're worth our time. So that's step number one for me every time we go somewhere.
So when you decide, and this is something, I mean, it's I heard it forever and I just couldn't believe it because I think I don't want to say hunting style, but my understanding of deer hunting has changed dramatically. But years ago, and it's even with turkey hunting, like my father-in-law, he would say, we're just going to go in at gray light and we're going to figure it out. And like, in my mind, it's like, I always try to be like super prepared. And I think lots of guys think that, the John Eberhart mentality is you have to be in there 2 hours before daylight and let the woods wake up around you. But I think where that is missed is those guys in those situations have deer on a pattern, or they know exactly what's happening. And when you're trying to figure it out, that's not always the best plan because you could be wasting some of the best time. So as you choose a spot, what is your plan as you go in there, and how long do you give an area, a spot, a sit?
Yeah. So after I narrow down those pins, right, I'll probably have, I'm thinking of last year, probably I like to have as many as possible. I like to have as many spots as I do days for the hunt. In my ideal world, I would spend one sit at one spot. And usually after that one sit, you can you get a sense for, hey, I should spend some more time in here, or this was probably a miss. Like when you're going in, do you bump a bunch of deer? Well, that didn't set up quite like I thought it would. And that's where it really goes from there, right? Is you have these pins that are, okay, the terrain looks right. And then now I want to dive in and dissect. Either I want to walk them scouting, or I want to just throw a sit at it. And, when you get to that point, there's several different ways to go about it. And it's just all about how they set up. Do I have access for the morning, for the evening? Do I think I need to get in there early? Do I need to go in late, like you said, and kind of walk around? So that stage of like, okay, well, where do I go from these narrowed down pins is a very, very fluid process for me. And it's usually a lot of bumbling around, to be honest. Like if I see a spot that I like and it sets up right, and I have the right weather conditions, the right wind, I'll just go sit it without scouting it. But as you're walking in there, you usually learn a lot, right? Where you thought you were going to sit might not be where you set up. And so there's just a lot of that. It's really trial and error at that point. How fast can you fail until you get an opportunity? That's really, in my opinion, the key to the whole thing. The whole going in blind on a short time frame, the intense short hunt, that's really the key. How fast can you move? How fast can you cover ground?
And so what are the determinations that tell you to move? What is the early indicators of failure? Because we all know that we sometimes, I think a lot of people will get married to an idea, like, oh, this looks so perfect, this is going to be it. And then we all know that it takes 30 seconds to go from the worst hunt of your life to the best hunt of your life. So what are your early indicators for changing or pivoting? And then at what point do you say, okay, we're out of here?
Well, I'll give you an example from last year. So last year we're in Nebraska, and we go in, and actually you're going to see this in a couple weeks on video. So we go in and we glass, and we end up seeing this. There was a little ditch coming off of a creek bottom, not a creek bottom, a little creek in flat ground going into an ag field. And on the map, it just looks great, right? If he's got a southwest wind, he can hop up out of bed, he can check the field, he can move. And so we went and glassed that. And sure enough, buck pops up, comes out, and starts moving.
Are you overwhelmed by the hundreds of food plot mixes out there? Well, you are not alone. And Vitalize Seed has developed a program that takes the guesswork out of food plotting. Vitalize makes it simple with their two core mixes, Nitro Boost and Carbon Load. Nitro Boost is their spring-summer food plot mix, and Carbon Load is for planting in the fall, each having a diverse mix of over a dozen seed types that are highly attractive to whitetail. Food plotting made simple. Each mix provides necessary nutrients to the soil, making for better plots each season. This also saves you money by needing less Roundup and fertilizer every year. The 1-2 system simplifies your food plots just how nature intended. And for the more advanced habitat managers, Vitalize also offers a variety of natural amendments with products like their seed feed that offer seeds immediately available minerals ready as soon as they germinate. Make biology work for you. Order now at vitalizeseed.com.
So the next morning or opening day, we went in to that spot and hunted it. And when we did that, we ended up getting busted by that deer. And after the hunt, we're going in the dark, right? So we can't see. But after the hunt, we got up, walked around, and we are just sitting smack dab in his bedroom, right? So we just weren't set up right. But so in that scenario, right, bam, I just busted this deer out of here. I gotta give him a day. So now it's like, okay, that's a great spot, but I got to give it a day. So where am I going to go now? What's the weather? What does the situation look like? And what are my other pins? How do those set up? What's my next best spot that I want to check out? So honestly, as I'm talking about this, it's almost like once I have those spots narrowed down, it's like, how fast can I either circle those spots as, hey, this is good, or cross them off the list? It's really a narrowing down process as I'm explaining this.
And so this is obviously going to change or be, using your terminology, a lot more fluid depending on the time of year. So you're give us an example that's earlier season, where we can go bed to food. We can do that. In these types of situations, is there, so for a guy who's, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of the internet commandos out there that can read a map, that can tell you what Johnny Stewart would do, what Rendell would do, Dan Infalt. They know the terminology, they know the stuff, but when they get in the woods, they're less confident in what they're seeing, right? So when you look at those things on the map, what are the main things you're looking for on the ground? And do you have an example where the two don't line up, right?
There's a lot of those. Yeah. I will mark an incredible amount of spots that set up right on the map. A lot of them do. Now, mapping stuff is getting more, you can tell a lot more from a map these days than you used to be able to. But I will say, over the years, these successes come once we get on the ground. It's not done on the map. The map is just a starting point. And I'll give you another example. So that same spot, right? So this is a tiny little piece of public that literally, it looks on the map, 90% of people would never pick this spot to hunt. In fact, even when you drive up to it, the road, it literally pulls into the field. The road, I mean, is the easiest access spot you could ever find. So that story I just told, right? We had that experience. So later in the year, we ended up coming back. We didn't kill on that early season trip. We ended up coming back, and we were hunting that same area. But on that early season trip, what we did is we said, okay, well, we found this deer right here, and let's assume that we bumped him out of there. Where's he going to go? Because the big deer, they don't move. You bump them and they don't really leave. They just shift. And that's just my experience anyway. And so we said, okay, well, where can you go here? There's a private piece next to it. So we looked it up. We went and drove over there. We asked permission. We got permission. We ended up hunting that, kind of getting our bearings. And then when we went back later in the year, based on what we saw on that early season trip, that chunk of private that we got permission on ended up being more of the focus. And the reason is because when we went back in November, we checked that public piece and it was totally dead. Scrapes dead, beds dead, everything was dead. So at that point, right, it's like, like it's fairly obvious, right? Like there's not really a lot of room to go. So let's focus on this piece. And so here's where the in the ground part comes in. So we dive back in there, and this is November now. It's like we've never been in there, right? Totally different environment. We go in there. There's this little, where a couple creeks come together, and there's a little patch of woods there and timber. And so we go in there, and it's nothing. It's not torn up at all. It's not that huge rut sign that I used to look for, which, by the way, I don't really focus on that anymore, because that's usually just in my experience, again, a pissed off smaller deer that just can't control his hormones. But we go in there for the first morning. I'm like, it's a perfect morning. Perfect, Adam. Like the mornings that you dream of. We're sitting there. I'm like, God, we're going to kill. We're killing right now. There's no way we're not killing. We sit there. And this little tiny 4-point comes in, hits the scrape we're sitting on. And that's all we see that entire sit. And one of the reasons I was so excited about the spot is because when we went back in there in November, we found that a little rut post that it's my favorite piece of sign. And he literally staked off this standing cornfield. It was incredible to see. And so I was excited. We went in there. We didn't see anything. We had the small buck come. And whenever I see that small deer, when I see a small deer, and there's nothing against small deer, by the way, but when I see that, the deer that I want to shoot in my head is not there. Because if that deer is comfortable being there alone, it's probably not the spot, or that big deer is with the doe somewhere else, or we bumped him, right? So we got to do something there. What's the next move? We know we have to move. It's just where. So the reason I bring up this story is that's just an example of on the fly moving, right? We had no idea what was going on in there. Walked in the first morning in the dark, saw the rut post, found the active scrape, set up in the tree. Oh, little buck comes in like he owns the place. This probably isn't the zone. We get down. Where do we got to go? Right after that hunt, we walk 70 yards the other direction to check the other corner of the field. And that's where the big rut post is, right? And so, boom, hey, we probably got to sit this. And again, you'll see all of this play out, but probably got to sit this. Okay. That next morning, either that next morning or the morning after, I can't remember if I gave it a day to sit. That's when we ended up killing on that second rut post that we found because of what happened on that first morning. So I know that this is kind of vague, right? But this is the kind of on the fly, bouncing around, figuring it out that, it's the style that I've really learned to love. It's exciting, and it does work. It works well.
Well, and I think that that's one of the things that I love, not only about this style of hunting, but the way that it's laid out, and even like some of the things that you use where you say like, it's a lot of fumbling around, right? I think that the industry wants everything to lay out a certain way, or everybody wants to be the expert, and they want to say like, this is all you need to do. And we can walk that all the way back to the Drurys and Lee and Tiffany's, where, they're in some people's mind had always been, well, you need this big acreage, you need food plots, you need all this stuff. And and we've gotten enticed by this mobile hunting public land stuff, which is cool. And you go to like the hunting public to watch them do it. And then you find these rabbit holes of the Dan Infalts, the John Eberhardts, that have this system that, I mean, Jake Bush is probably the other one, where here's a formula. And as long as you stick to this formula and you work hard, it's going to pan out for you. But what's left out of that, like the last thing I said, that work hard is where people fail, I think, because of time, because of, family obligations, because of whatever. And then when you try to implement those tactics on a 3-day hunt or a 5-day window, you're left pulling your hair out. So that chaos, and like, even though what you've said is vague, I think it's a very big statement to say, hey, this is how we're really trying to figure it out, like in the moment, right?
Yeah, I mean, those systematic hunters, right? Like, they're putting in a tremendous, and I have a lot of respect for those guys, right? My personality, I can't do it. Like, I cannot go find 1,000 beds in a season. I have no interest in doing that. Nothing against them, right? But I think but I think people attach themselves to these systems, and it's easy for them to get attached to it because everybody is looking for that solution. What's the easy button? Not that any of those systems are easy buttons, right? But they appear that way. Like, if you just do this, you're going to kill a big deer. And, I've always kind of felt this way, but it's really been solidified in the last few years, is that what works in one scenario might not work in another. In fact, I would argue that most of the time, what works in one spot doesn't work in another spot. Deer, they're different. They got different personalities, and there's no question about that. And they just act a little bit different. And there's just subtle differences in these terrain features and these setups that are impacting it in a way that you kind of have to figure it out in the moment in certain situations. So,
yeah. So as you're saying that, I'm kind of going through my head. In not only are there these situational hunters or these hunters with these scenarios, but a lot of people are. I mean, I would put myself in the category of, like, I feel like I can kill a deer like during the rut because they're dumb, just like any kid on a bucket, right? Like, a little bit of hard work and a little bit of knowledge and a lot of luck, and you just got to put yourself in the right position and got to understand it. Now, for you, you're talking about early season, but you kill deer through the rut, through you and Kevin have this weird mid-October lull window where you're like, oh my gosh, that's a really good time for this and these spots. So as things change, and you're saying, like, every situation doesn't play out the same, like, what allows you or what facets of the way that you hunt allow you to have success throughout the year in all of these different situations for guys that are, trying to be more well-rounded or trying to figure it out? Like, how does it all, like, weave together?
I mean, I would argue that it's simply because I'm not attached to a system. Like, these systems are very specific to certain times of the year sometimes. And the big difference is that these guys who have a system, right? What they're doing is they are looking for a deer that fits into that system. Whereas I'm kind of the opposite, where I'm trying to change what I'm doing for the deer that are there. Because if I find a deer, I've only got a short amount of time to make something happen. So I think that's, now that you asked that question, I mean, that helps us tremendously, right? Because our whole mindset is, okay, well, we'll figure it out when we get there. And so it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, if it's September or November, it just doesn't matter, because either way, we're going to have to figure it out when we get there.
So I probably said that a dozen times this year already, and I know I said it on my way to Kansas last year, and I know for myself that it's never been like out of state hunting, like for whitetails, that changed my mentality. It was when I went elk hunting. When I went elk hunting, it's the land is so big, and you have to use the map and you have to read the ground so much that when I came back, that's what changed it for me. So what changed for you to say we'll figure it out? Like, at what point did that snap in your brain and say, okay, well, I guess we'll just have to figure it out?
I think it was when I got married, and certainly when I had children. But I mean, it's just I've somewhat, like I said, I have been forced to into this system. This is not like some genius plan that I came up with. This is just my life. This is what I got to work with. In other words, I save all my days away from home all year long. I don't go glass. I don't go scout because I know I got a limited time away from home. And I'd rather spend that during the season when I can kill something. I want to be there. I want to spend more time in that window when I can actually shoot something. Now, the argument on the other side is if you spent time earlier in the year, it's going to take you less time to kill something. And my experience is a lot of the scouting that I do early in the year is not applicable when I get to the season. For whatever reason, maybe I'm scouting the wrong way. But just for me and my hunting style, it just works best to do it all in the moment. So
for guys that are listening and that are hearing this and saying, well, I don't think I could do that, or I don't think that it is feasible for me because maybe my mind doesn't think like that, whatever. Like, what gives you the confidence to just say, because I think that is a big piece, and it doesn't matter who you talk to. Like, and you said it earlier when you went in there and you found that, when the little 4-point walked by, but that morning you said, we're going to kill right here. Like, all these guys that kill often, and, they go in confident every sit they're going to kill. Like, what gives you that confidence to say, I don't have to do anything? And I know you do, but like I don't have to do anything throughout the year, and I'm just going to figure it out. Like, where do you get that confidence, and what can help other guys that are listening to kind of encourage them that it's possible?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I wouldn't call it confidence. I would call it a positive attitude, right? Like, I am in no way arguing that you shouldn't scout, because if you're able to scout, you're going to have an advantage, right? But if you're not able to spend hours and hours, days and days scouting in the spring, you can still have a very successful season. So that's my only point there, but I think in general, right? Like, if you're going in on a short hunt and that's what you got to work with, you might as well think you're going to kill something. I mean, why not? Like, you're getting up early in the morning. I'm usually in a lot of pain when I wake up. Just, I'm old now, and I tell myself that we're going to kill something. That's just what I've learned to do. And I think it's partially because back when I was younger, man, I was kind of a son of a bitch hunter. Like, it was like a very overly serious thing for me. And to be frank, I'd get pissed off when something didn't work. And for whatever reason, now I've just matured, I think, past that. I'm not a kid anymore. And it's just like, I can't believe I get to do this. That's what's going on in my head. It's like, I don't really care what happens. I'm going in to hunt this morning in a really cool place. And so it's not really a confidence thing, I'd say. It's just hey, why not have a positive attitude about this? It makes the morning a hell of a lot better. I'll tell you that.
So one thing that I've talked about on the last couple of podcasts, I think, is, and talking with Matt Lair for sure, he's one of these guys who doesn't want to go to the same spot twice. And I know that you've talked about in the past it taking, when you're curating these spots, it takes a few years to figure them out. And like, can you explain that a little bit? Because I asked him like straight away. I was like, "Are you just a sadist? Like, why, if you're going in and there's good deer and you have like an idea of like what's going on there, why would you not want to go back there?" And his answer was kind of like, "I just want to do things the hard way." My buddy Tom, like with elk hunting, he's like, "Yeah, I could probably kill a bull in there now that I figured it out, but I want to try somewhere else." It's like I have no idea why on a short window of a hunt you wouldn't want to have all the chips in your favor. So
Yeah. So for me, it's not that I want to do things the hard way. For me, I see my time, my available hunting time decreasing quickly. And so I know that if I put all my eggs in one basket, that could really hurt me at some point. It's so easy for a deer to get busted out of there. It's so easy for somebody to find the spot, especially now, right? I mean, there's just so many resources. Like eventually somebody's going to come in there. So I've just, I've told myself, I've dedicated myself to just look, we have to continue to find more of these, call it a honey hole or whatever you want to do, so that over time we're stacking those up. And the only way to build a Rolodex of incredible spots, right, is you got to keep exploring. So, not to say that we won't go into a killer spot. I mean, I've been playing this in my head over and over this entire year of what I'm going to do in the spot we were describing earlier. So it's not like we're not going to go back in there, but I'm also going to make sure that we spend a little time exploring some other areas, because eventually over time, right, you're going to pull up your Onyx or Spartan Forge or whatever, and you're going to have looked at every spot in that area. And then, so for me, it's like, okay, well, if I cover this area, I know what needs to be done. Maybe I got a buddy that wants to go hunt that area. That sounds great. Then I can just drop in there, right? And I already have it done. So I like to cover ground, right? And just build up spots so that I have options in case something happens.
So for this going in blind, and I've said it and I'll continue to say it. Like, I think, okay, so I'll back up a second. What is your plan for hunting Michigan this year? And how does that vary from your out of state hunts?
I mean, so right now, I'm kind of in a weird spot where I've spent my entire life hunting Michigan. Michigan is one of those places where I've stepped foot on pretty much everything. And so I'm kind of in a weird phase right now where I'm very interested in the out of state stuff. I am addicted to like new terrain and seeing new trees, different type of trees and different ground and different sky, sunrises. Like I love the whole variety. I love seeing things that I've never seen before. And so Michigan has kind of taken a little bit of a back seat as of right now. Again, just because this is like one of my faults, right? Is that I'm always thinking into the future. And so I know that coming up here, probably sooner than I would like to admit, I'm going to be hunting Michigan a lot. So I'm kind of taking advantage of my time now when the kids are young to explore some areas that it probably will be tough for me to get to in the future. So a lot of my season is focused on out of state stuff this year.
But in that, with Michigan, when you hunt Michigan, do you go at it with the same tenacity or the same game plan?
Exact same game plan. And I mean, hunting Michigan has molded me as a hunter. I mean, my time bashing my head against the wall in Michigan has made me the way that I am now. So, the when I was younger, I was trying to fit into a system, like I'd always be trying these different things, and it just, for whatever reason, it just wasn't consistent enough. And I ended up doing what I'm doing now anyway. And so I think that, that's really why I do what I do. It's nothing that I conjured up in my head. It's just been molded into what I am today because of past experiences. But if I were to hunt Michigan, I would try and find places that I haven't been. Like, that's why the Northern Michigan camp, right? I've lived in Southern Michigan my whole life. So, there's a lot of stuff up north that I haven't touched. And so that's exciting to me. And with that being said, there are areas that, tomorrow morning, if I wanted to, I could go drop in there, and I know that I'd probably have some action. So it'd be the same approach. It wouldn't change. I love this style. I don't see it changing. Maybe when I'm older, if I can ever afford a farm, I'd probably enjoy that a little bit. But
Well, I always wondered, just because, and maybe I'll put you on the spot here, just because it's, you have a company now, you're making content and all this stuff, and like, big deer get attention, or bigger deer get attention. And I think for a lot of hunters, even the guys that I know, will shoot some does in Michigan and then go chase bigger bucks out of state. And I think for guys in Michigan that can kill deer, it seems easier out of state to locate big deer. Maybe that there's less hunters elsewhere, maybe less bow hunters elsewhere. Maybe there's higher caliber deer elsewhere. I don't know the answer, but I guess it just always feels like there's a balance between like the chasing big animals and like accomplishing something here in Michigan, if that makes sense.
yeah, I mean, like, first of all, there's no question. There's absolutely no question that it is easier to get on big deer outside of Michigan. Why that is, I think it's a combination of everything you just said. But anybody who argues that it's the other way is, I don't know what world they're living in. But Michigan's just challenging, right? Because you got challenging terrain. You got your big deer are usually a lot of the time living in I'd call it hazardous areas, and but it's just, I don't know what it is, but it's just the deer in some of these other states are just, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is the best way I can describe it. It's the only way I know how to describe it. But in terms of like, look, if you shoot a 3.5-year-old deer here in Michigan, that is a hell of an accomplishment. It really is. And private or public. So, you got it. At the end of the day, it's your hunting season. Like, there's no competition. Like, you're not playing for anything. So you might as well do what you want to do. If you want to go shoot at a giant out west, do it. If you want to trounce around in the swamp and, work your ass off so that you can say that you did that here in Michigan, I think that's phenomenal too. I mean, and for me, I'm interested in the out of state stuff right now. I'm interested in big deer. I'm interested in seeing deer do what they're supposed to do, because I am interested. I do really I love the strategy behind deer behavior. Like, why is a buck doing what he's doing? I love that. And in Michigan, you don't get to see that too often if you're hunting public, because they just act different around here. They just do. And I'm confident in saying that because I've witnessed it time and time again. I mean, the deer we killed in Nebraska, I rattled in. I didn't even think I rattled in 2 big bucks this year. And I say that because I thought that shit didn't work. I thought it was a marketing scam. but it works. Who knew? So just kind of where I am with things right now.
I just like to pose the question to Michigan guys who are getting on deer elsewhere.
Yeah.
Just because, like, to me, we have so much going for us here in Michigan with the amount of public land, the amount of deer, we have really, really long seasons. We have a long gun season too, but we have lots of hunters, and I'm just always curious because, like, I would love to see somebody, and they're out there. I mean, and they're guys that you ran into in their underwear at a creek that kill big deer consistently in Michigan. But nobody's really showcasing it, from a public standpoint. And I have to ask the question of, like, why aren't we doing it? Just because,
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, it's and let me clarify, there are big deer in Michigan. 100%. I've seen them on camera. I've seen them in person. There are big deer. Right. And so I do want to clarify that. I love Michigan. I've just hunted the shit out of the state, and it's interesting going other places. And I will say this, there is tremendous value in hunting different areas, because what you learn and see out there ends up applying to what's happening here in Michigan. There are a lot of tactics a lot of things you observe elsewhere that you're like, this happens all the time. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That might work at that spot, which I never would have thought about that if I only hunted Michigan, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that can also be correlated to those systems, right? Like, we don't necessarily have to know that a buck beds in this clump of trees and we have to be there this time, blah, blah, blah. But if we can understand that just as a overarching idea, that looks like bedding over there, and there's probably, there's a good chance that there's a buck in there because of the sign that I saw out here. You can use that. You can go into one of these places in, the hills and find a hub scrape, and you don't have to know that deer lives right there and I got a belly crawl in here to get there. But you can say there's a good chance that this is where the bucks would be bedded in this area. So if I set up here, and then you can use that like you did at the Northern Michigan hunt and say, well, the only piece of terrain where it looks like something would bed would be right here. So we're going to try it. And, it doesn't always work, but when it does, it's nice. And that's what I like about the whole going in blind thing, is as someone who's still trying to learn and still trying to, improve upon all this stuff, is that validation, right? To be like, I thought that's what was going to happen, and it did happen. And that may be what the root of what I was asking earlier is, that confidence to say that you can do it, is like, you get validated enough times that you say, okay, well, maybe I can do this.
Yeah, that's a great point, Adam. I would, after what you just said, I think that it builds confidence, and there's value in building confidence in yourself. You end up having a better time out there, right? Every once in a while you got to do something that works. Otherwise, you're just going to kind of lose, depending on your personality, you're going to lose interest or get pissed off, one of the two. So that's a big part of it. That's a great point.
Yeah. And so when you are in all of these like different situations, what do you think isn't being talked about enough, or isn't like that guys aren't either hearing about or applying in these situations? Because in what I just said, and kind of like what you just said as well, it's like I feel like those guys that when they don't get those little confidence building things, that's when they revert to gear and like, okay, so maybe I need trail cameras, maybe I need a gimmick, maybe I need something else. So what do you think like isn't being talked about enough or being applied?
Yeah. I'll be honest, I don't consume a ton of hunting media, believe it or not, just because just because of everything we just talked about, right? I'm kind of not really looking for tactics anymore. And I'm just in a different spot. But I will say the one thing that I would argue is the single most important aspect or ingredient for success is a positive attitude. I think the mental aspect of hunting is not talked about nearly enough. The reality is that if you stick with it and you keep going and you put a smile on your face and you appreciate that you're even out there doing what you're doing, man, you're going to have a lot better time and you're going to start having a lot more success. Just because, your attitude of some of these spots where we end up killing deer, seeing big deer, man, they just don't look that great. Like it's not obvious that there's some big animal here. It's these very subtle signs. And so I think that if you go out there and you think to yourself, like in my head, I'm like, oh, that's a beautiful spot. I can't wait to sit there and watch the sunrise. I just want to sit there. And so that's kind of the attitude that's been wired into my head lately, because we have a lot of unsuccessful hunts, a lot. You could ask D-Rock, he's, he looks at me sometimes like I'm crazy, but, I always put a smile on my face and just, that was fun. It was a beautiful morning. And I'm just thankful we get to be out here. And I think that never gets talked about. Just having a positive attitude, for those guys who turn to, oh, I need this gear. I would say you definitely don't need any gear. What you need is a smile on your face. And, thank God that you get to sit in this tree this morning. And that's made an incredible difference in my life as a hunter.
So and I've seen guys on the both sides of the spectrum, and I think the more positive guys have a different answer than the guys on the other side. What do you consider a successful hunt?
If I had a good time. That's it. I mean, and I'm being totally honest about that. And I'm just a little different because I was a very different hunter when I was younger. And it got to a breaking point where I was either probably going to quit hunting or learn to enjoy it one way or the other. And I don't know what happened. I can't put a finger on what happened there, but it did. And I'm thankful it did, because, man, we struggle a lot. And the thing is, every hunter struggles a lot. These guys that you see killing big deer, they're having a lot of bad sits too. A lot of them, I promise. So I think it's important to keep that in mind and remind yourself of that. I remind myself of that every day we're hunting, because it's hard.
So what do you think is like if you were to say, okay, if I want to get on a big deer, what is the most important thing that I can do no matter the time of the season? Like, what's your go-to? Like, let's say that you're not having a successful time. Let's say that you're not having fun. Like, what is your tried and true thing to fall back on? Like, where do you go to when you have to dig deep and say, okay, I know this always works, or this is what I need to do?
Cover ground. Like, walk around until you walk into a big deer. And that's it. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and is that, you said walk around. And so is that, because I was going to ask, is it driving around and glassing? And do you care if you bump a deer? Like if you're walking around and then you kick them out of there, that's fine too.
Like if I get desperate enough, I will drive around or walk around, depending on the situation, until I get eyes on something. Like, and this is just a learning over the years. I've not always been this way, but like now it's obvious to me that, look, if you're struggling in a spot, you just spend a day and go find a deer. Like that's, in my opinion, now you don't really have another option because you're running out of time, and I do not think bumping a deer is a bad thing. And that's a different statement than I would have made 3 or 4 years ago. So, that's just observation, learning. I don't think it matters. I think those big deer are so in tune with their area, especially if you're hunting anytime around the rut. Man, it does not matter. Like they're not going to move. And so we hunt this piece in Wisconsin, and there's just this incredible buck out there. We saw him briefly again last year. We are all over his spot. Like he has this bed. It's a bed unlike anything I've ever seen. And I know that he's there, right? Because I have a camera there, and he's there, and we're there. We're there together. Like we're in the woods together all the time. We just, so that's just been very eye-opening to me, right? Like he does not care that we're there. He's like, I know they're there. I'm not, whatever. Just wait till they leave. So, I mean, and I think bumping deer gives you an advantage as well, because it gives you a little bit of a insight into your next move. So if you bump a deer in a spot, all of a sudden you're like, well, wait, why was he there on that day? What was he doing? It gives you some information that can help you make your next move. If you bump a deer, if I bump something and then the next day or 2 days after, sometimes I like to give it a day, but that's my most confident sit, because I know that he's either going to be back in that spot or he's shifted over not far, So let's say you got 3 points. You found him on 1 point. He's probably just going to shift to another point. So there's 3 points. You got a 33% chance you're going to guess right. That's kind of how I look at that,
Yeah, it's awesome. I love this like candid conversation, because it isn't, you talk to enough people and like what they're going to say, what their style is, there's going to be so much, like you can only get so much from a system or whatever, but fly by the seat of your pants. Like I absolutely, like when I saw it, I just absolutely loved the it's okay to go in blind. And I'm really glad that you were able to expound on that in this manner. I think it's really going to help a lot of people, and it might not help them like kill a deer, but it may help them have a better time in the woods and try to create a better understanding of like what is going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if there was anything I would say to the hunting community, it's like just trying to have a better time out there. And I think it's because I'm so deep into this world, right, at this point, that some of the guys that I'm dealing with are so serious about this. And it's nothing against them, but I see the negative impact it has on them at times. And when I see that, I see myself from 10 years ago. And so it's just, life experience, right? That's all this really comes down to. But, and the flying around thing, it's very inefficient, right? Everybody efficiency is like one of the ultimate hunting buzzwords, which it makes me chuckle, because like there is no pattern, there's no system. These are animals. They do what they do and they live out there, and you're walking into their house. They're going to beat you 90% of the time. It's just the way it is. So, thinking that you're going to be and now there are certain scenarios where this does not apply, right? like if you have a farm that's manicured and that you're manipulating the ground to direct deer movement and you're keeping tabs on the deer every single day, that's a little bit of a different story, right? But the flying around thing, man, it just opens your eyes to a lot, and it helps you learn. So
Yeah, I absolutely love it. Now, you've said that you don't need any gear or anything like that, but Latitude has a lot of new great products coming out. I'm very disappointed that we've not seen the Alex Chopp high socks, the signature socks yet. But
yeah,
hopefully soon. But what can you tell me about some of the new stuff you guys have coming out?
yeah. So this whole like going in blind style of hunting, flying around, ultimately that's what our gear is designed to do. And I would argue that that's what all mobile hunting equipment gear is designed to do, because if you're playing in a very systematic if you have a very systematic approach to your hunting, you don't, your setup should be a little bit different, right? It should be calculated. And I think being mobile there helps too, but our gear is really designed for everything we just talked about. It's for figuring it out on the fly for the average hunter who doesn't have time to put 200. In fact, the guy told me he put 1,000 miles on scouting the other day. And to me, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how many people can actually do that, right? So our gear is designed to help the average guy figure it out on the fly, because I think that that's what most people end up doing. Even if they scout in the spring, they probably end up figuring it out during the year anyway. And so you guys have seen the new saddles. We have the Maverick and the Lone Star, which we're obviously very excited about. The Maverick being your ultralight minimalist saddle. That saddle wears into the woods unlike anything I've ever put on my body. I absolutely love the way it wears, and it feels like you're wearing nothing. The Lone Star is your Matt Tompkins TX5. He's obviously working with us now. He called it the Sadillac, and that's absolutely what it is. It is the epitome of quality and comfort. It has more bells and whistles and features than it's kind of hard to believe, but they all work together to give you a very, very comfortable saddle. So if you're a guy or gal who prioritizes comfort, the Lone Star is incredible. You guys are about to see a couple other new things. 2 new backpacks, one of which you guys have seen for years because I've been running it for 3 years. It's called the Ranger 22. And that pack is really the goal of it. Again, this was a Matt Tompkins design, but what I loved about it is that I used it all year round. If I were to scout in the spring, I scouted with it. I hunted with it early season and I hunted it way into late season. I never had to change my pack. So it kind of adapts with you and gives you that all season option for people who don't want to swap their pack out. So that's the Ranger 22. And then there's a smaller version of that too, which is really geared towards the tree stand hunter, but the pack will also work well. And we've seen interest from saddle hunters who want to be as minimal as possible. So it's a very small pack. You guys will see it in a few weeks. But that's a nice option as well. And then there's a tree stand support system that marries with that to turn any tree stand into a frame pack. So that's a really cool system for tree stand hunters.
Yeah.
And then the last thing you guys are going to see is a new platform. And the new platform, it's called the Profile platform. And it's a roomy platform. And it's unique because the post of the platform actually recesses into the platform itself. So if you take the where you put your feet on any platform and remove the post, that's the profile of this new platform. So you can slip it in and out of a pocket of a pack or anything like that very easily. So that's the main advantage of that one. And again, you'll see more details on that in a few weeks here.
Awesome. So what are you most excited about? Like what's your, like if you
gear wise?
No. Like for the gear.
What am I most excited about for gear?
I thought you said deer. I was like, I haven't seen your pictures. Like, I don't know which one.
Oh, I don't have any, Adam.
Yeah,
So.
I know.
What am I love the pack, right? Like the pack, I really pushed for the pack. I love the pack. I think it's just the perfect pack for what it's exactly what I've always wanted. Matt gave me one 3 years ago, and I've never put it down. And we took the one I had was a Gen 1 version of that pack. And so, a few years have gone by. So this new one coming out is a kind of a very similar in terms of its overall footprint. But we've made some tweaks to it to give it just a little bit more advantage, just some detail stuff. So I'm really excited about the pack. It's an awesome size pack. So if I had to pick something, it would be that. But like everything has been exciting this year with new product. Just because bringing Matt in, it's been so much fun, and it's been a breath of fresh air around here, and he's just incredible to work with. And Kev and Jake as well. I mean, just the work they're doing on the product in general it's gotten to another level. And you guys will see that as you get the new stuff in hand. But so I'm excited and mostly thankful that we're still around. It's hard to survive, but yeah, a lot of exciting stuff going on.
Sure. And then just lastly, look, when does the new series of Grit launch?
So Grit will launch. You'll probably see the trailer first week of September, and then the first episode I think will be towards the end of the month. As you can tell, we're just like we hunt. We're kind of figuring it out on the fly here. So,
awesome.
But yeah, it'll be September sometime.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on and catching up. But like I said, I think this is really going to be helpful for a lot of people, just as even if it's just a breath of fresh air to say like, okay, it's okay to fumble around and figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, just have a good time out there. That's what I tell myself, and it's working. So it's worth a shot if nothing else.
All right. Well, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Adam.
Friends of NRA is your chance to support our Second Amendment rights and preserve America's hunting traditions. Join Friends of NRA at one of our 600 exciting events nationwide. From games to auctions and exclusive firearms, Friends of NRA events are your chance to support a cause you care about while having a great time with patriots in your community. Whether you're a seasoned shooter, an avid hunter or outdoorsman, or passionate about freedom, there's a place for you within Friends of NRA. Visit friendsofnra.org to find an event near you. Stand up for freedom with the Friends of NRA. Friends of NRA is your chance to support our Second Amendment rights and preserve America's hunting traditions. Join Friends of NRA at one of our 600 exciting events nationwide. From games to auctions and exclusive firearms, Friends of NRA events are your chance to support a cause you care about while having a great time with patriots in your community. Whether you're a seasoned shooter, an avid hunter or outdoorsman, or passionate about freedom, there's a place for you within Friends of NRA. Visit friendsofnra.org to find an event near you. Stand up for freedom with the Friends of NRA.